listening to The Exchange by Evolution, a melting pot of ideas and inspirations shared by some of the most successful technical leaders in the APAC region. I'm Pearlie, Associate Consultant with Evolution Recruitment, and I help connect businesses with top tech talents. Today, I'm your host. Just a disclaimer before we get into the discussion straight. All thoughts and views spoken by the speaker or myself are only representing each individual and not that of their company. Welcome to another installment of our podcast. On today's podcast, we will be discussing the topic of emerging technologies in education, where we will be discussing about how emerging technologies such as AI and VR have potential to transform the education industry. I am delighted to be joined by John, Chief Technology Officer of EtonHouse International Education Group. Hey John, to begin, it would be great for you to introduce yourself to our audience.
Hey, thanks Pearlie for that lovely intro. A quick intro of myself. I'm John, and I actually has been in the education sector for quite a while. So I'm currently at EtonHouse. So prior to that, I was at ISCA also, which is very near to your office. And before that, I was in Singapore Institute of Technology as one of the founding members over there in terms of the IT and the Learning Lab. So education has been an area that I've been focusing in for quite a while.
Ah, I see. That's so interesting. Okay. And all right, really glad to have you here with us today. So obviously, you
Them too.
So obviously, you've been in the education industry for quite a while. You've seen how technology has helped to evolve things. Yeah. So there are a lot of buzzwords, like AI, generative AI, right? Around recently. So how can AI really be leveraged to enhance teaching and learning experience these days?
I think the first thing that in terms of any institution, before embarking is there a use case within that institution? So there are many buzzwords, even Web3, at that time, they were having the same buzzword, what's Web3, we're going to do it. And to be honest, it sort of kind of die off, eventually. Because what is the real use case in that arena? So generative AI is definitely one disruptive technology, I would say. But it is disruptive as in a positive way, let's put it that way. And for us, there are many areas in terms of AI that we can use. I mean, if you look at how we can use generative AI, the common ones that everyone knows is ChatGPT. So if you talk about ChatGPT, even for teachers, let's say for teachers, teachers actually prepares the classroom materials or even curriculum. They could actually use it, in terms of putting in the necessary or the correct prompts and then get the information. That gives a draft. You may say, then what kind of creativity they have? But actually the thing is that sometimes you're so busy that, a kind of draft actually helps you, giving you a spark. And actually that starts and saves quite a number of time rather than sitting there and staring at the wall and thinking what to do next. So this type of things actually helps in terms of actually preparing what kind of classroom lessons. That's one area of use, especially for teachers. The other is actually depends on your age group of the student. Yeah, so let's say the age group of students is towards a secondary school kind of cohort. Then it's a bit different because the students then can use generative AI for their own purposes. So there were principal talking because we also run international school for EtonHouse, right? So sometimes the principal's asking, with this generative AI, and they can't stop people from using it. And their essay seems to be perfect now. In that sense. And then they were asking that same question, how are we going to make that kind of grading and evaluating? But I think, teachers are coming along the side and says, well, instead of actually closing the matter, they're saying, it's how we actually structure the way we ask the questions actually, in terms of how we can actually probe even further their thinking capability and answer according to various situations, which could be different. So it's not so much of descriptive anymore, so more applicable kind of scenario-based kind of questions. So again, if you talk about generative AI aspect of things, these are prompts that they can actually use it, because I think it's quite a fair bit of things. I think not only in terms of text AI that we talk about, but also pictures, pictorial. So, I was looking at a kind of use case whereby some of it use it for even education. We also have marketing aspect of things. So, sometimes we actually use generative AI to come up with very diffusive kind of art. And sometimes you blend it with QR code and so on and so forth, to make that QR code not that kind of plain black and white. So they can actually use, generative AI for that areas of to make that unique look, for the company. Not only that, I think in several areas, I've seen people using it, whether it's for PowerPoint generation. I also seen it for them actually coming out with logos and some kind of pictures actually, because they actually expressed, in terms of certain scenarios, and it comes out with kind of pictorial that they can actually pull. Of course, then you have some of you talk about IP problems lah, but I think that will be a separate issue. That I think, unfortunately, the market now, if we talk about it, is a big issue on its own currently in terms of IP. So in terms of education, there are many use cases actually for generative AI. So that is definitely one potential area that we talk about versus Web3 lah. So there are people using it, and actually we are also trying to refine the use case, because there are many use cases also in terms of saving staff productivity. I'll give you an example. We had this productivity kind of gain where we said all teachers have to produce some kind of like term report, right?
Okay.
So how do they come up with a draft term report? I have so many students, hundreds, thousands. And of course, we can say it's already decentralized for each teacher supposed to write their own draft reports, right? But the bottom line is that if generative AI can actually take in based on the assessment that they actually did, and based on the assessment they did, what are the texts that the teachers actually put in on a kind of weekly basis and all this, the system can actually draw and pull out all this information and give a draft based on the students' performance, the students' kind of improvement that they have, the students' status as of today, the day you wrote the report, because they can actually draw from the data that you actually pump in their daily activity assessment that they've done. So that aspect of things, actually, to be honest, it's really a productivity game for them, because writing drafts will definitely save time for teachers, and teachers actually would like to teach rather than doing administrative tasks. So if you actually start to leverage all this, it actually helps them. You actually free them from doing what they love best, which is, I think, teaching and educating the next generation versus all this administrative tasks. But of course, administrative tasks is something you need to do because you need to inform, communicate to the parents and everybody up there, right? So that's something that you can't run away from it lah. So there's quite a number of use cases, I would think. Even within EtonHouse, we were thinking aloud, some of this. And also we were looking at, instead of using those traditional intranet, we already sort of cut it off.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we already used AI to let the internal staff, ask questions and then get the policies and procedures, of course, in a very secure way. Instead of actually trying to search and say, where is this manual, sub-manual, where is... No more, And so they ask questions directly, and it says, can you tell me what is the policy that states, what is the retention period of a video recording that I need to keep for CCTV. Now, this is going to be in one line of the IT policy. But by searching into using generative AI, the generative AI will tell you very nicely, the EtonHouse ID policy states that the retention policy is up to XX number of days. And it's a straightforward answer, rather than searching through, first of all, getting your policies right, and then after that, which page of that policy is right, the CCTV. But this actually cuts out all the time and give you a very quick answer, and they love to use it. So we have very positive feedback from staff, using this type of intranet portal. And I think that's how we're going to run it. I mean, I see in a very positive light, for that.
Sounds great. And, now that we have known the potential use cases, especially with in EtonHouse, right? That's really cool. So in terms of AI, we've already covered that. And what are some potential use cases of, virtual reality and augmented reality in education? And how can this actually improve maybe students' engagement as well?
Okay. To be honest, EtonHouse, we have not engaged so much on the VR and AR perspective. But maybe I'll give a little bit more on how this VR and AR technology actually works. And, when I was looking at how some of the other education institution does, it comes with two prongs, actually. We use VR and AR for training for staff. So I saw them the way, and I was thinking about it for a while, so how we can actually apply that. Is sometimes we can't go to certain, we can't go to certain places all the time for training because teachers are pretty tight in the timing. Yeah. So a VR and AR is where we have a set curriculum that the teachers can use it for improvement purposes. So I give you an example, like if I wanted to guide a new staff in terms of a specific topic in science. So when we talk about certain areas in science, we want them to actually know some of the technique that they want to use. So a VR would actually, help them to know in terms of immersively how in terms of how they're going to teach, and in terms of where we are going to head for that area. So for example, if you want to talk about the deep sea specific topic, then I think in terms of the VR, they will actually go through with them how it's going to be run for the students. At the same time, I think in terms of VR, one of the biggest challenge that we have is actually the gadgets related, because it actually goes down with wearing the goggles, and which is actually can be quite tiring after a while. So one of the things that we talk about was actually more towards AR technology, whereby they don't have to wear so much of the heavy goggles to actually run around things. But unfortunately, the market is such that there's still more ready-made kind of topics or curriculum in the VR space versus AR. So basically, when we start looking around, we did suggest certain areas of topics. So again, it depends on some of the international schools. Some of the international schools actually use it for interactive purposes. So they use it for interactions such as in conjunction with maybe interactive TVs or interactive boards, depends. It could be a very gamification of a certain areas of topic they want to talk about. Again, it's something that it varies with schools actually. So certain schools actually use it more for exploring maybe areas of topics of interest. I have to keep saying that because it has to come down to a certain kind of topics that we talk about. Then they use it for VR and AR. So we don't really set up like go to a classroom and our classroom is like, wow, this VR, AR. No, it's not like this. I think we are still a very lab-based kind of thing that people can go into lab and actually try out a certain VR and AR kind of technology. At the same time, sometimes we put it at the common corridors. So correct. So if you use it for AR purposes, it's possible because we actually fix some samples there for them to actually try it out. And again, it's more for relaxation. So some of them would like to use it like some kind of games that they have. And actually that works also for preschools. Yeah, so some of our, EtonHouse also runs enrichment centers. So some of our enrichment centers also is actually we uses this kind of gamification. Maybe sometimes is to ask them to explore a certain place or land, so they can actually use it. You need to go to certain areas, then go to this door, that door, this door, that door, and then based on that they can answer certain questions. It could be maths question. It could be also in terms of shapes. It could be many things that they actually play with. So actually that brings out that level and interest of learning more. For a start. So we still leave it easy on that portion, in VR and AR space. And but at the same time, I think student likes to use it. But at the same time, I think parents also have got this iffy sense, that sometimes I think enough is enough for gadgets. So I think we have to balance that. We have to balance that. Maybe for older kids, it's less of that balance. But if you talk about preschool, no. If you have a child of a preschool level, I'm very certain you don't want the kid to keep on looking at gadgets. And I think the parents will say,
like glued to the screen.
Yeah, correct. I think it's okay. I'll prefer some more traditional way of doing things, So there is a mixture, there is a blend, but I think at the end of it, we have to remember some of the things they still prefer the traditional way of teaching. I think some of the parents will still like, and even the children will like, a teacher reading out a storybook rather than some kind of watching a kind of VR, AR over a story. Well, you may see some will like that, but that plain old reading big books of that storytelling, I think that is something that the children will still like to embrace. So let's not overdo technology perspective, when it comes to education perspective and all this.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Balance is very important.
Yeah, we definitely need to strike a balance on that. If not, I think, we will just be a very geek-based kind of teaching just because we're chasing after technology just for the sake of it. I think it doesn't work out that way. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you've mentioned a couple of challenges, right? So what are some of the top current challenge or limitations in adopting this kind of, technology in education, you would say, in your opinion?
Okay, the truth. The truth of this whole thing is sometimes at the end of it is there's too many for us to consider. And it's always the new technology is coming up. So I think it's important. Some of the challenges that we have is actually, we always say is you can experiment. We don't actually say things like, hey, teacher, before you experiment, talk to us first. It doesn't make like that.
Yeah.
So you're free to experiment, but if you want to use it for a bigger scale, sometimes it's good to talk to IT, so that IT can actually be involved, because there's just too many possible new technology that we can't. So I think the challenges is actually the selection, and actually IT actually be able to give advisory and guidance role in that aspect of things, because sometimes it's not just a new technologies and everyone get excited. What's the governance level? Sometimes you look at this, we look properly, right? There's no proper governance. There is no proper even the security updates, patches is available. No, it's just a new thing. And then if you want to roll it out, right? Okay, that's fine. But if this is something I classify as not quite secure, unfortunately, we still have to look into that aspect of things, then maybe I have to give you an isolated server. So that is the kind of things that we do talk about. That the challenges is that we don't prohibit people from exploring, but at the same time, it's good that IT needs to be involved in this. Number two is that at the end of it is, again, it boils down to what is the best ROI for the company. Sometimes we dare to explore if we say, as what I said, given to a small group of people. But if you want to go out in the big masses, it must make dollars and cents for the business perspective as well. Okay, we can say that this is part of the enrichment classes, that's under the thing, you pay extra, that's one thing. But another way of actually running it has been incorporated as part of the teaching to give us an edge, that's fine, because there's a certain ROI on it. But at the end of it, we have to balance it with the cost because all bosses will ask the same thing, especially during this climate whereby it's very uncertain and the interest is extremely high. So you know, every that dollars that you invest, you know, we just had to be very prudent about it. So that is how the challenge is actually trying to balance it, because sometimes you say, I hear you every time you say cannot make it, cannot approve. Sometimes it's not from me, man. So you know, that's the kind of things that we need to talk about. But I think at the end of it, we also said that there's a certain prudency, and because, you know, we also have to weigh against certain costs of our traditional systems that we have, right? So we still need to run with a finance system. We still need to run, you know, with some of this learning management system. We cannot say like, oh, this is totally, we are just investing in new technology all the time. But what it is, you know, at the end of it. So we just have to weigh and balance along the way. And sometimes it's also important to look at more use case before you start looking at it. The challenge sometimes is, I want to be the first one, but not all the time, you know. Not all the time. I think you go head on and say, I want to be first one. Of course, there's first mover advantage on this, but again, it's important to weigh that. So in general fact, I think I would say that the challenges are always there in terms of managing your expectation with your colleagues. That's one area. Number two is actually managing the ROI or the cost. Number three, also you should also manage your board and your bosses lah. Because I think at the end of it, the bosses also want to be very certain every dollar I invest, everything that we do, you know, is that a real return for me? And you must actually help them to understand along the way. I sort of disagree when people say that, well, my bosses cannot understand what we are talking about. But frankly speaking, if they are from a business angle, seriously, you really talk some business sense out of this whole thing, right? Because like EtonHouse is not a non-profit organization, so it's a different ball game, you know. So at the end of it, I think we just have to be careful on that. I think one more fourth point that maybe we could consider, it would be actually in terms of the resources, because the challenges that people have is that, oh good, try new things, but you got people to really manage to assess, to try out or not. And also whether the challenges of all this startup that actually comes to you, whether they can live long enough or not. So I agree that startup has got this creativity juice. But at the same time, I see startup that falls, because I do run startup in the past before. So basically, when we start having this discussion, we need to know that there's certain risk to this whole thing of trying things and going with the vendors. And also, if let's say if these vendors fail, who can take over? Should this be something that you cannot want to write off? So I think there's certain things that you need to look into in terms of both the resources and the viability and really whether there's such enough capability. Just like, this AI thing is causing a boom. In the same way, do we have enough AI engineers? The truth is that it's very hard. The total number of, AI engineers in the market now, it's insufficient. Even within US, and then I think China will start scrambling for it. But I think in terms of the whole market, if there's not enough for the big boys, how about our locals? It's going to be lesser and even more difficult to find. So these are things that I think we just have to be aware about, not to hamper people from actually going for all this AI, new technologies and all this stuff. But I think you need to know the viability of it at the end of it. Of course, we want it a little bit more long-term. A product that you invest at certain dollars and cents, at least you must last for a good few years if the amount of money that you invested is like 5-6 digits. at least a good 3 years to run, right? So if you cannot even last 3 years, then forget it, There's something that we talk, unless it's a very small amount of money, a few $1,000, $10,000, $20,000, die lah. So that then again, you just have to weigh that. So in terms of all the challenges, I think the whole idea is actually just to make sure that the fundamentals are there. Yeah, let's don't run around things without getting our fundamentals right, and let our emotional runs instead. That is the biggest problem. I always got people who runs with full emotion bank. Tells me, John, I tell you, I want it. This is the best. I was like, okay.
Are you sure you did the full analysis? Weigh the pros and cons.
Yeah. But usually I will let them speak first lah. How excited they are. Let them talk about it, and then after that, then not that we find a weak point, but actually we just have to make sure that our grounds are covered. Yeah. So that's the totality of things, and I think at the end of it, it's very important that we communicate constantly, with our peers and everyone around us. So communication is key. Whether you want to do or don't do is one thing, but if you don't communicate well, you don't get them involved, at the end of it, you like top down and say no. Walao, you got another problem.
Yeah.
So there are many facades to this. So I have to say that we just keep on to to this couple of points. I think it won't be going too wrong. Yeah, with the whole thing. Yeah.
Okay. And earlier you also mentioned, governance when it comes to rollout of new technology, right? So what would be some top ethical considerations when it involves implementing this kind of technologies in schools?
Yeah. So ethics and governance is slightly different, but let's address it accordingly. Now, governance is something that is very important. I give you an example like data analytics. Everyone is enthusiastic on writing out dashboards, right? And zooming it in. Yeah. But then we reach a point that sometimes and say things like, hey, who can see this data? It's getting more and more like secret. Because you start drilling down and say, wow. So when that happened, no, and they say that you sure this one can be seen by all HOD or only senior management? So when we first do it, sometimes it's important that you balance that trying out versus when you really want to implement it. So governance is really important, whereby you really sit down and think through, where is the rules and the boundaries that you have to actually draw that circle in. We can't be giving a loose and a blank check to everybody in the aspect of things. So governance is important to restrict and to know very clearly in terms of who, when, and what you can access. I think you just have to remember that aspect of things. So to me, governance is very important. It is a weak point if people don't look into governance aspect. I feel sad for them, seriously. You will reach a point that people ask all these common questions and you regret it, right? And they start running, because then you suddenly found that, hey, how come my development reached a point it was stifled? Because people then automatically comes in and try to be protective. Yeah, that's what is happening lah. Okay, to our existing geographical problems also. But anyway, so that said, I think that's one. The other thing is, of course, when we were talking about what was the other point that we mentioned earlier on? Just now you were saying one is on governance, and the other one you were talking about ethics.
Yes, ethical consideration.
Okay, ethics is a very big word. So actually, you asked me about this word ethics.
It can be quite controversial, right?
Yeah, it's both controversial, but at the same time, so when we talk about ethics, we have to remember, that's what people start talk about. Is this belongs to me ethically? So this is a big debate, especially in the areas of the AI kind of arena, because some of the things you may say is, I want to know where the source is. Have you even get approval from the source? Ethically, is this correct that you're using other people's work? Is this company happy that I'm using it? So I think in terms of the AI ethics, for example, I'm just giving AI ethics, it's something that our government is also trying to do in terms of setting a certain kind of guidelines in that area. We all know that the EU is also looking into that aspect of things. Then it comes to India and all this. But I think at the end of it is that ethically, we just have to remember, if something does not belong to you, you do want to get a certain permission. If not, it's like stealing lah. So in a blunt word. So I think in terms of that, there's certain moral and ethical sense, where we start to use all these things. Yes, it's convenient. Yes, it gives you ideas. Yes, it may be borrowing from somebody's ideas, but I think at the end of it, there's certain points that we always say is that, is there a better way that we can govern this kind of whole ethics practice? Some of them may give you their blessing, some of them may not. So again, that's where there'll be like people squirming over this whole case lah. So it's pretty new, but I think as we keep on exploring all these new technologies and all this, there will be bound to be a kind of, we do not want to stifle creativity, but at the same time, I think all these things comes in place. Governance is one, ethics is one. I think at the end of it is seriously looking with your whole eyes open, knowing full well that what belongs to you, what doesn't belong to you, and what to makes everyone happier, So I think that's something that this kind of acknowledgement and agreement that has to be ongoing. And so let's look at more and more the kind of government regulations that will come along the way in terms of how we can actually move this. So just keep a watch out on that in terms of ethics here.
Yeah, very good point in terms of like IP and all.
Yeah, it will come up.
And so John, what do you think education institutions like schools or even like EtonHouse, can do to prepare for the future adoption and implementation of technologies in their day-to-day curriculum?
Yeah, day-to-day curriculum. Just now I think I mentioned a little bit on some of this as well. I think if the technology has a real use case, can help in terms of both productivity, can help in terms of a new angle of actually make our student be interested in terms of learning, it's something that we can seriously always consider, because at the end of it, the use case and the business case ties in hand. Because a new way of learning is always something that will arouse interest. Yeah. And I think that's something that for EtonHouse, if there's something new that's on board, I would always say is that let's try it out together. Let's try it out with a small group of people. Let's actually experiment in our kitchen. Okay. So our kitchen, you can actually blend, try things out, and actually a safe place where we can put. So it could be an area that we can actually say you try things out, with certain accounts and all these things. Again, it depends whether it's a software as a service or whether you can download the software, because some of it is open source, right? So you download it, and actually we just put it in some kind of server for them to do. I record also IMD actually having this kind of concept whereby you can actually experiment new certain technologies, and MDA actually sponsor the hosting space with the vendor, so they can try it out. So that kind of things is the same thing that we provide environment for them to try things out, if it's open source especially. At the same time, we also try to actually work with the vendors, if it's a vendor-based kind of solution, to actually try it out. If it's not, again, sometimes a lot of times is you need to actually, what do you call that, depth into that situation whereby you really need to have hands-on to try it out. There's no way to run about certain things. From a user's perspective, as long as it's not too complex to use, and some of the users are very IT savvy people.
Yeah.
And they will automatically pull this out lah, try this on their own lah, add prompts lah. I was like, wow. And then until so complicated, they can even write certain codes for you, and then start to run and compile them. I was like, okay, I think maybe you should change the IT department. and then and basically with this, actually they try things out, and they'll be the one who actually runs and actually comes after you. So in the same manner, if you ask me what EtonHouse is going, this is how it runs. It actually, we have people coming to us sometimes to talk about it. But of course, sometimes it's IT initiative. IT actually come and talk to various departments and says, hey, we have this idea. I have this idea about, using generative AI, as I say, to prepare certain materials. Would you be interested to explore? In the same way, when I'm talking to finance, they have AI, but AI, to a certain extent, I have to make sure that it's action-driven. So I would want to have an AI, but I may need to incorporate with an RPA that actually do maybe maybe comparison, in terms of or even scripting of delivery orders, and to make sure that it's delivered and therefore the system is ready to pay out to the vendor. So we may want to automate that process. So from an AI perspective, I would actually ask like a question like, this month, what are the remaining outstanding invoices and why, example, and they could come up with certain of this, and maybe they follow up, they could have an action that says, okay, what do you want to do next then? Right? So do you want the system to actually automatically trying to do the comparison for you to scan through? We could do that because there's a lot of new OCR technologies in the market. So it may not be just generic AI, but also they say OCI and AI. But then I just sometimes felt that the word AI is the same problem that they all have about digital transformation, the misuse of words. So okay, there's certain enhancement in your technology. It's fine. Is it really AI? I don't know. But at the end of it, it's the same thing. OCR has technology, even in Azure and in many arenas I saw. They're very good now, to the extent that they can recognize documentation, all these things, way beyond our expectation in the past. And with that, actually, it helps, for example, in terms of solving our procurement and paying, because we have a lot of vendors. We have so many schools, and at the same time, we need to make sure we pay our vendors promptly. Not all of them are upset. And in the aspect of things, automation is one of the key ways to actually lessen the workload of all these manual tasks, of making sure that everything is reconciled. At the same time, I think it actually helps in terms of the payment kind of life cycle to be faster and quicker. So these are examples that we will say these are the use case that we have. Sometimes it works both ways. Sometimes the users come to ask us. Sometimes it's we ask the user. Yeah, so that aspect of things actually we try to cover. So IT no longer is just doing IT. IT actually, there's this both giving an insight and a consulting role. It's no longer just the traditional IT that we talk about. So it's easier said than done, because we all know IT need to run business as usual. So when you run business as usual, unfortunately, we still have this new inclination of actually remembering that technology is not stagnant. So we have no choice. You can't say no choice, but basically we should be kept abreast of what is the new technology. And really, if that really helps your company, go forth and try it out. So that is always in our mind. So, our staff actually, one area is actually looking into this, but sometimes it actually they are constantly reminded, to come out with their creativity. To solve problem, to come up with the ability to look from a different angle. Yeah, so even within staff, we have meetings and all this. We have once a while, we always come out for lunch. Once a while, we try to look into areas, whereby can we do it different from what we have. And for IT, we will even take one step further. Let's put it that way. If you are a daredevil to actually try new things, and you felt that not only these new things, I can build on it. And I can build on it, I can bring this further. And I found that this thing that I'm doing is something a little bit unique. Can I productize things? And if you can productize things, you are on a different wavelength again. Because when you productize things, you start to say that, okay, am I going to build a different revenue stream with your boss? Some of your bosses may like that. Yeah, so how does that actually work out? And actually that constantly is also something that we also look out for. Yeah, not because of the business aspect of things, but seriously, sometimes we say, hey, these things, if used by others, may not be a bad idea. We don't mind sharing this idea too. So I think that's how we work, and that's how we talk about things. I think for EtonHouse, sometimes in China, we do talk about how IT is actually being used. Of course, they have their own certain worlds, but even for China and Singapore, even as I also oversees China as a CTO over there. So basically, when we look at things and visualize things, we look at how products can interact and actually brings up even further new product lines or even new ideas that comes together when two products try to synergize together.
I see.
Yeah. So there are many. So there are many ways of actually looking at this, and just always be creative. Just know very well that it's a standstill kind of process of IT and how you actually move IT as a whole.
Okay. I guess in essence, I'm thinking that you would encourage organizations to keep an open mind when it comes to adopting new technologies and then, being creative to see how, different technologies can blend in together, work together, create new revenue streams like you mentioned, right? Yeah. Great. So thank you so much for sharing your insights. I will leave it here as it is, as that's all the time that we have for today.
It's all right.
Yeah.
You're always welcome, man.
Yeah. I really want to take this opportunity to thank John for providing his insights and knowledge on this topic. And yeah, thank you everyone for listening. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.